Among the toughest questions that I have been asked ever in my life are how I would specifically define consciousness and what would be an example of a universal truth. And, well, I never felt besieged by these questions, although I have felt through my, well, let's say, awareness that these are questions that constantly pound against humanity's existence and kind of threaten to, well, let's say, threaten the fragility of many beliefs that we have. See, consciousness is not something that one will perceive. Yes, it is something that you perceive through, but you will not be able to define it. You can ask any AI agents, yes, and as such. Every bit of answer that you can get is just a minor, feeble definition. Hence, why this question still pounds at the very consciousness, at the very core of our existence. Because the longing of life, once you make it used to the idea of meaning, well, it will start wanting and craving more meaning. But you have to understand one thing: the life that you have does not have an awareness. Yes, it is fully unconscious. It gains the power to, it gains the power of discernment through the physical body that we are. Yes, that we have, but I prefer calling we are because in this lifetime you are your physical body. Yes, obviously the physical body is not the entire being that you are. There are multiple dimensions beyond the mundane of your physical body. But there are other things regarding your physical body that you also do not know. Yes, according to my, how to put it, intuitively received cosmogony, see, there is a particular entity that created and enabled everything that we perceive. And they created that alone. Yes, out of the hundreds of thousands of beings that created this particular cosmos, one single entity created everything that represents this consciousness and everything that represents the possibility for anything to experience emotion and everything else that represents awareness. Yes. And when one asks, what is actually awareness? Well, awareness, the only straight definition that you can give is your possibility to be. Yes, the power to just be. That is awareness. Yes, because out of being come out all the passive characteristics. Yes, the ability to be aware of everything. That's how English calls it. Maybe, it sounds a bit flat, but other languages can portray it much better. But it is the possibility to simply shut down the circus of the survival mind. Yes, the mind is nothing else but a concept, a construct that you make use of in terms to survive. Yes. Now, we live in a sick society, more like a death cult society, that wants you dead one way or another. It wants you constantly drained, and also it has a certain toxicity that drains us all the time and forces us to live in survival, because in survival it's the easiest to be controlled. This mind that we have has multiple layers, not just the intellectual side, which simply is nothing else but AI. Yes, it functions by the same exact principle. It uses data that you have accumulated throughout the time, either yours or, well, other people's experiences that you have heard of or that you have seen them experiencing. And guess what? You're making use of those to survive. Yes? Now, the very point is this, in many people's cases, ends up as that which rules them instead of them ruling their own life, their own energies, and the such. The more you embrace a certain lifestyle, the more certain parts within you will try to simply fight to support it. Yes, if you convince your life energies of a certain truth or something that you believe in long enough, your life energies will start supporting that. That is it why it's hard for people to give up on certain things. Yes, especially if they have become acquainted enough and comfortable enough about that. Yes, you create a lot of memory within your body of you having done that and feeling in a certain way. Yes, which convinces your body. Remember that your physical body does not have an awareness on its own. Yes, everything in this cosmos functions in a subconscious level at least. You have the possibility through your discernment, yes, you must make use of your discernment to become conscious. Yes, the more conscious one becomes, the more knowledgeable they are of everything that is in this cosmos. I was told by my intuition and whatever guidance I received throughout my times of utter loneliness, throughout my childhood and beyond, that the purpose of life is to simply reach a super heightened state of awareness. Yes, unconscious beings, yes, you can call them gods, creators, whatever way you want, they realized that there are ways to simply experience things. Yes. So in my cosmogony, similar to even Hinduism, yes, before I even knew of Hinduism and other pagan beliefs, or well, not taking Hinduism as paganism, but well, that's what terms humans use in general. Now, this is a bit important because, at least to me, because it is something that says even those creators designed this cosmos so that they can experience a completely different state of being. Yes, completely separate from their unconsciousness. Yes, they choose to become even better than the version that they are. Because mastering the human body or any other body that enables them to experience the full-fledged power of consciousness, of being fully aware of the cosmos, their entire creation, yes, and maybe even the beyond. Well, that is the greatest power. Because these creations, these creators, just create, yes, they do not use an algorithm for their creation. They have a certain intelligence of their own, which guides them automatically to create whatever they need to create. Just like all animals on this cosmos, on this planet, let's say, at least on this planet, they live in an unconscious way as well. But their necessities, they constantly repeat those necessities on and on again. The future generations also get those, and each generation shifts evolutionarily towards that necessity. That is how evolution survived and moved further through the multiple phases, so the multiple stages that animals had. They needed higher wings, they needed a bigger body, they needed survival mechanisms, they needed to see in the dark, they needed to walk on land. All of these were subconsciously necessary. So in time they went deeper and deeper. They became more and more powerful. And in time, creation simply bowed down and altered itself, yes, to fulfill that necessity. This is a power you also have in your life, but obviously it is not recommended for a sick society to support you in this. Yes, otherwise you would not be easily controlled. Because it is truly easy to control people when they are obsessed with meaning. Because meaning means there are hooks. Yes, as long as you have a belief, you can easily be hooked. One way or another, you can be triggered at least when people piss on your belief. Yes, and when you get angry, you get controlled. Because whoever angers you controls you. Yes? So one has to comprehend a thing. As long as there is meaning within people, there is a way, more or less. It may take more or less time, more or less effort, but there will be a way to piss you off and or to find other means to control you. Yes? Because a lot of people are living life unconsciously. And if you live life unconsciously, if you're not making use of the vastness of the resources that you have, others will. Yes? Because in the end, let's look at one thing. If you don't follow a dream, you will follow someone else's dream. Yes? When you work a job, you simply ensure that the CEO and the higher ups have an easier life. Yes? If all the workers would go away and let's say they choose starvation and no one else would come in that company, the CEO would most likely follow in with the same fate. Yes? Because if this model goes on, obviously the poor will most likely die or they will find a way to work around something. The rich will hide behind bunkers, but they're not going to be able to live forever because in many cases they have done only the only thing that they know and they've not bothered themselves too much with survival. Yes, because it was never in their question. It was never in their awareness nor in their necessity. Yes. So regarding consciousness, this is not something that you will be able to ever define. It It is not a definable property of something. It is, see, if we have to think a bit about consciousness, when I was very, very, very young, okay, I knew that there was something beyond matter that I could see. In time, I became aware enough and knowledgeable enough of human terms that I would call it energy. But I knew there was something even beyond energy itself. Yes, that ether, which I did not know, I called as the universal coding of the universe, or the universal laws. Initially, I called it the universal laws of the cosmos, which were similar to the coding behind every application, every video game, and the such. Yes, that code is what you may call also a part of consciousness. Because consciousness, you can define it in any way or form, but when you look at it, it has an intelligence of its own, which always works flawlessly. Yes, rarely does it even make a mistake, because it, on its own, is not perfect as well. Yes, and consciousness, when you look at it, it can derive in any possible direction. Yes, emotionally, psychologically, mentally, and that is what it does. Yes, imagine it just like some of those video games where you have behaviors or things you can put points into. Yes, and then you create slowly and surely a kind of behavior. Yes, you have more damage, you have more defense, you have a certain play style which you can compare in a way to a behavior. Yes, consciousness is what lies in the middle. Yes, consciousness in a way is perfection because it is that which is above duality, because it is fully linear. Yes, it is nor good nor bad, it is nor this nor that, but it allows everyone to experience that duality from an unconscious perspective or from a more advanced perspective in a conscious way. Because in a conscious way, you can choose to use anger to uplift yourself. Yes, don't be surprised. There are yogis and, well, advanced masters of the mind who can make use of anger and they channel anger for minutes, if not even hours on end. And they do that to experience certain dimensions of this cosmos that they need. It is just a personal pursuit. It is not necessarily something that will benefit you, for example, but it is something that they seek. We all seek something. And even if life just throws us a mundane piece of shit existence, we all have that inner craving, that want to embrace more. Yes, except when you are unconscious and comfortable, you will embrace the comfort that you have already and you will simply long for nothing. It will still bug you. Yes, that longing will still exist, but you'll easily give it up because you have comfort. Yes, the reassurance that someone else will save you, the reassurance that something will do whatever possible to deliver you from all your problems or whatever else. That is a big poison. That is a very advanced level of control, but it is a big poison. Yes. Now, regarding the other question, yes, what is a universal truth? See, a universal truth is not something that is written on a stone tablet and that is how everything functions. Yes, universal truths are something that are layered. Yes, because universal truths exist based on your layer of awareness. Yes, the more you experience, the more you become aware of the world. And in time, the truths that you once know, some of them will shatter and some of them will just become more profound. Yes? Think a bit like this. Even yogis will tell you about this because in the end, the point is people simply evolve. Yes, they change in time, they become better. You'll probably even remember how many times in your life did things simply crash. No longer, like suddenly you woke up and something you were obsessed with simply no longer made any sense. You simply walked away from it as if it never even existed into your life. Yes, there are things like this, and I guess many, if not most of the people can attest to this. Now you can look at the levels of a universal truth from this perspective. Let's imagine that you are a child born in an equatorial country. Yes, you go to school and then you obviously learn about snow. The first level of awareness is that of a drone. Yes, you simply believe everything you are told, and that is almost always the level of awareness that a child will have. They simply follow adults' examples and they, well, pursue that as well. Yes, they follow their examples, and they simply do not question. Yes, much like any other adult living by the drone level of awareness. They never question, they just follow. Yes, so you go to school and you learn that snow exists. You never have experienced snow, but it's written in a manual. Your parents most likely haven't seen snow as well, because let's say maybe they never moved away, and in an equatorial country you're not gonna see snow, most likely. So the point is not even artificial one, let's say. So let's say you hear also your parents saying, snow exists. Yes, it is not something in our country, but it does exist. So obviously, one extra reason to, follow suit and obviously believe that piece of knowledge. You find some friends who are, let's say, in Europe or Asia in a more temperate climates, or maybe America, let's say, and you move to them towards the autumn, and suddenly, unexpectedly, after 1 month or so of staying by their place, it starts snowing. And you ask what the fuck it is. What is this, white stuff dropping from the sky? Yes, these flakes of whiteness that fall from the sky. Yes, because school teaches you to learn things by heart, or better said, by mind, blindly, but it never teaches you to actually associate things. Yes, and you will hear that that is technically snow. And maybe you will have suddenly a flicker. It's like, hey, wait, I've learned about this in fucking school, but I've never actually experienced it. So now you have moved to a different level of universal truths. Yes, I'm saying universal truths that apply specifically to this planet, but in the end, they are, at a much smaller scale, a good definition, the best that I can provide to understand a universal truth. Yes? Now, suddenly, you have experienced snow. You're taking it into your arms, you listen to it, right? Not listen, you crumble it, you see that it has a texture, it melts in your hand, it gives you a certain experience. So now suddenly you're no longer just a drone. Yes, you're no longer believing in snow just because other people said about it. Yes? In time you become fascinated, let's say, and you study it, and you hear that snow, just like water, has a certain sound resonance. Yes? And it has a variating one. Let's say suddenly you reach the northern part of Sweden, yes, or any extremely Nordic part of the planet, and you see a frozen lake. The funny, very weird part is that these lakes can pulse with certain random sounds that are not easily perceivable. But if you use certain specific apparata that can record sound, that can identify sounds, you will feel certain pulses, certain rhythms within those lakes, yes, as if it's a heartbeat of the planet, as if it's some roaring entity waking up to life. That is part of the planet simply living. And some of those sounds are made only because the ice cracks. When the ice starts cracking, there are sounds that are imperceivable to most human ears. Maybe some are a bit more sensitive, and maybe they still do not hear them like with their ears, but they feel them, and that feeling also gives them a sensation of hearing. Yes, perception and awareness of certain things can get a bit fuzzy to explain. When you're explaining things beyond the common senses, yes, beyond the five senses. And now suddenly you are aware of a much bigger truth that ice, in the end, or snow, is not just snow, it's just water. Yes? Now this is a perception. You've known that water is somewhat conscious. Yes, it is a living entity. You know that water turns into ice. Yes? And now you're experiencing that, let's say in that particular example that I gave. Because yet again, school told you that, well, water can turn to ice, and that water may be, in some places in the world, people or children are taught that water is conscious, which my awareness says that it's very rare, but there are cases. And yet again, school failed to teach you the correlation in between the two. So now you have learned this as well. Yes, and now you are aware of this as well. Similarly, in your spiritual development, as you wake up, you will feel certain truths, and they will be valid for you as long as you have that spiritual level. when you reach a new spiritual level, suddenly some of those truths fade away. Yes? And then you get um, improved versions of some of the truths that still held together. Because your capability to perceive things is also coming from a limited perspective compared to consciousness on its own. That is why when you look at yogis, for example, and spiritual masters, the most advanced of them still have somewhat different ways of expressing things, which in some cases, to some people, feel even contrasting. Yes? Let's take a case by example. See, remember probably Buddha. Yes? Many people think that Buddha is a name. Now, the Buddha is technically a title name. Yes? And the Buddha that people say they know is actually named Gautama, as of what I heard, and he was called Gautama the Buddha, which Buddha means that one who has transcended the mind, the monkey mind, or, the noise of mundane existence. Yes? So, with this having happened, yes, the point is that he became aware of very many things. He met another um, enlightened master, let's say. And some people say they argued, but it was just an exchange of opinions. Because the Buddha became aware of how many thousands of layers the mind has. And the funny thing is that each of those layers is one more capable than the other to simply screw you around through the power of your imagination. Because the biggest power of the mind is that it can present to you something so vividly that you're gonna find it hard, extremely hard, if not nigh impossible, to distinguish it from reality as is. That is why so many people take their dreams into account as if they have been real. Yes, this is the power of your imagination. This is the power of your mind. Very few of your dreams are actually prophetic. It's a very small number, but that also depends. It differs from individual to individual because each one has their own level of awareness. And dreams, though they can be given a generalized interpretation, still each dream is tailored specifically to their beholder. Yes? So asking around what that dream can mean, well, you're gonna miss on a lot of the meaning in the end because, it is tailored for you. A generalized meaning can be given, but how do you know it specifically applies to you? You have to become aware enough to embrace that knowledge freely so that you no longer depend on others. Yes, because you never know that other people actually want your good. Don't forget that to a lot of sick people, spirituality is almost synonymous with psychiatry. Yes, just like to a bird born and forced to live its whole life in a cage will most likely think that flying is a disease. Yes, those are some deep thoughts to take into account. So when it comes to universal truths, see, Gautama the Buddha said that there are 7 great layers to the human mind. The other enlightened master said, no, there are thousands upon thousands of layers. Yes, but Gautama said, no, there are only 7. He knew that there are thousands upon thousands of layers, but instead of presenting that to the masses, yes, of people who are obviously illiterate, because that's how the masses have been throughout the times, he chose to classify them into 7 major archetypes of layers, yes, which is much easier to teach instead of telling someone, hey, your mind has, let's say, 13,000 layers. Obviously, there will be people who would obsess about naming each and every one of those layers because it will make them look very ingenious. Yes, when true genius means synthesizing something, packing it up in such a way that even the brainlets can comprehend. Yes, that's how you distinguish an ingenious professor from someone who is just a professor, or better said, a teacher, someone who just passes on knowledge. Yes, there is a difference. Some, those who know how to teach, will be hard to be replaced by machines or applications. Even I can do some educational applications in RPG Maker. It is extremely easy after 7,000 hours in that platform. And I can make some of those, but, well, maybe in the near future. I do have some plans for that. Yes, but in the end, A teacher who just passes on information, they can easily be replaced by machines, and AI is kind of slowly and surely doing that because a lot of students can make easily use of the ingeniousness of AI design models that can present you information, vast levels of information presented in a very good way. Yes, in a very short way and a concise way nonetheless. Is AI infallible? Obviously not. But is it a good tool? Definitely a phenomenal tool, which can be used to make your life either a miserable hell if in the wrong hands, or, well, a much better experience. Yes? Depending on how it is used as a tool. So, experiencing is something that you will never be able to express in words. Words have not been designed for such experiences. You can take any language into account. You will see there will always be a limit. Yes? Because consciousness is exactly like black holes. You will never be able to experience it. The moment you experience it at the fullest, it is still 99%. And once you have experienced that nectar, even for a slight bit, you will want to simply end these cycles of reincarnation. It is how consciousness functions. The closer you choose to be to it, it will attract you more and more into the beyond, into that which you were truly before you started suffering the cycles of karma. Yes, you have to look at you not just like some dumb mortal who's gonna pass away and nobody's gonna remember. Nobody's gonna remember this physical body and whatever it has achieved because you're probably not doing something great. But most people have not necessarily done something great, but they have done a family and they have left some lineage. If those people wouldn't have existed, we in the present time wouldn't have existed as well. So I would say each and every human being should be given some credit for the courage that they have had to experience, to go on through the consciousness, through this, how I call it, the journey through consciousness, because, well, this is part of my own cosmogony, but maybe for another video. Hopefully this video raised a bit of awareness. You are appreciated, take care, enjoy life, and this being said, Ferenc Jan Bord signing out.